I'm going to take my step back. We have to.
Hi, how are you?
What's that? So I'm still learning everything new. So at the previous church I served, it took me like 3 years to learn that there was one guy who was very excited to be on vestry because the vestry person it was their responsibility to get the donuts that day. And there were only 2 of a particular kind of donut. They're like this old fashioned, but they came with chocolate on it. And when he served on vestry, he got to steal. I didn't know that donut existed because he stole it before anyone had a chance to see it. And it was the thing that gave him the most joy about serving on the vestry, he said, among other more noble things. But what's one of the things you enjoy most about this time together, coming together for Sunday school? Is it something that's going to take me long to figure out because someone will beat me to it? I'm always the last in the donut line. That's the clergy's lot in life. It can be super superficial. Doesn't have to be like friendship. Yeah. The coffee. Wait, so the coffee, and we're all like good on the coffee. Like some places, the coffee. They had another church I served. They never could get the coffee right because they kept forgetting how many scoops for their maker, and the church is named Trinity, and so the rule is like 3 scoops, and if you did it that way, it was perfection. And otherwise, we get our forks and knives out and chew it. Friendship, coffee, hearing people's stories. Have you had the experience of discovering some amazing part of someone's story even after you've known them? Like you thought you knew everything about them, and then you're like, I didn't know about that. You were there too, or you did that too. That's one of my favorite things in life is discovering that we're all. I discovered at the age of 35 something that my mother is an amazing table tennis player. Because I did campus ministry for a bunch of years, and there were table tennis setups downstairs, and we would go down for dinner and for table tennis. And one day my parents were with us, and I knew my dad. Those of you who know him, he's competitive at everything. I think he's like, it's just sort of compulsive. My mom was just kind of quietly along for the ride with some of those things. And we get down there, and I was able to hold my own when I was playing dad. And then my mom said, "Give me those paddles." And she cleaned that off. And I said, "Mom," I called her later. I said, "I didn't know that about you." And she said, "That was a whole season of life, misspent or not." And then she kind of got misty-eyed and said, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that even in very close family, we still have ways to surprise each other and gifts that will be, she was saying, you won't know all of what God has done in my life when I'm gone, but you'll have hopefully like the end of John's gospel. If we were to write down all the things Jesus did, we wouldn't have enough room for all the books and we wouldn't get to them. But you've been given enough to believe. And I feel like there's that kind of treasure and mystery in each of us too. What other things about Sunday mornings would someone be wise to get wise to? Absolutely. Well, wonderful. We're going to spend a couple of weeks, this week, next week, and the following, in this time, hopefully making space for some of those unexpected stories and getting to know each other better. I know it's not hard at all for you all to get to know me a little better, most of you, because we're just meeting. But hopefully to make space for some of my stories, for me to get to hear some of yours, both individually and the stories that you share as God's people at St. James. So I want to see now we're testing the technology. Here we go. This is a prayer that some of y'all will recognize. Yeah, this is the beginning of our McEnroe Connors moment. Boy, that dates me. I should have said like Federer, Nadal or something. But this is a prayer that comes from St. Richard, but it's also one you might recognize from our hymnal. And it was one of my mom's favorite prayers. So I wanted to invite you to pray it with me. We won't sing it, we'll just say it. as a way to begin and set apart our time together. Day by day, oh dear Lord, three things I pray: to see thee more clearly, love thee more dearly, follow thee more nearly, day by day. Amen. Is that prayer familiar to any of you? Some, yeah. I mean, it's still in there. It has a couple of different tunes we know it by. One of the things I love about it is the expectation that each day we're kind of like those the people Jesus heals in Mark's gospel. He puts his hands on them and heals their sight, and he says, "Can you see now?" And they're like, "I can see. It looks like trees walking around." And Jesus says, "No, this isn't the Lord of the Rings, so there are no walking trees. Let's try that again." And then they see clearly. So the idea that the life of faith for you and me is less like an on-off switch, like we either got it or we don't, and more like a continual growing every day. So Phil, we may need to leave those open for the Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. And so you have this experience maybe in a life of thinking like, yes, this is my experience of life or faith, and then one day it deepens. And then one day it deepens. And this is not only the story of our lives, it's the story of many of the figures that we're introduced to in the scriptures. So we're going to look at that a little bit later today too, in a hopefully fun way. All right. So some of y'all have said I look young for a priest, so I wanted to give you a picture from my actual ordination. Because that's that ordination of the priesthood back. No, that was me as an acolyte. I was 6 years old. The daily growth happens for us in the life of faith, just as it does in every other part of our lives, right? So we grow older, we grow in friendships, we grow in all these different ways. My kids just think it is so fascinating that folks think I'm young, because I am not that for them. But this is the actual picture from my ordination, part of my daily walk. That was back in 2006. So it's true, like you can get younger, I guess. And then we grow, and our stories collect people. God speaks through people. God speaks through these rhythms of word and sacrament that we commit our lives to, and we are sometimes knowing it, sometimes not knowing it changed. Another favorite prayer. Anyone know where this prayer comes from?
I don't know where it originally comes from, but it's the confirmation prayer.
Confirmation prayer. Does anybody remember? Anybody been confirmed? That's supposed to be a softball for most of you, but if you've been confirmed, there are two options for the bishop at that point, but there's sort of 50-50 shot you had these words prayed over you. Would someone with a loud voice like to read it for us? Amen. And there it is again, that dailiness, that daily seeing more clearly, that daily expectation that maybe God showed up for us yesterday, but we might do well to wonder what God is up to today. You remember, like when the Hebrew people were wandering in the wilderness, God is in the process of delivering them, and they said, "The food here is terrible, and such small portions." That's an old restaurant joke. And he says, "I'll feed you. How about the manna, the bread? We'll have manna from heaven." And does anyone remember the stipulation or the rule that came with the bread that fell from heaven? Yes. When we lived in Wisconsin, there was a bakery that was amazing. They closed in the pandemic. It's called Manna, and they served day-old bread. And I would always laugh when I would read that and my kids didn't think it was nearly as funny as I did. But no, you gather the bread for today, and then you eat the bread today, and tomorrow you have to do it again. There's no hoarding the bread. There's no holding on to it. And that very much is kind of Jesus, who comes as the living bread. we get that sense too in the Gospels. Like even at the resurrection, Mary Magdalene sees him and is like, I want to hold on to you. And he's like, can't hold on to me. Peter on that mountain says, I want to build 3 booths, like lock this moment down in time. We can't do that either. But there's that dailiness. I have a little journal. I try to like keep my habits healthy and like watch the amount of time I move and sleep and all that kind of stuff. And there are some days I really wish sleep was something like I could do tomorrow's sleep today. Because I've got time to give myself enough sleep today. Tomorrow I might not, but we can't. And there's that call to dailiness again, both the expectation that there'll be greater and greater depth, but also that there's something to the steadfastness and the steadiness of the steps we take across a lifetime, even as God shows us new things in them. All right, so I mentioned to you that, let's see, here, it doesn't like my connection again. All my instincts are thrown off. Here we go. So a painting from mine, he's an artist. He lives inside of Dallas, but spends half his time in Taos, New Mexico, where he has an artist gallery. And I dabble in art. If I could produce this piece of art for you, I would be thrilled. I cannot produce this piece of art for you. He produced this piece of art and just held on to it and said, huh. And then he came back to it a few years later and he turned it into that. And we need Terry to give us like a breakdown of all that changed and happened in that. But I love that those things where we might feel like, yeah, this is that kind of tendency in every human being towards complacency. And God says, and maybe more than you can ask or imagine, as the prayer book has kind of taught us to pray. So in the life of faith, this is not just the life of faith. We find ourselves seeing things. Julian of Norwich, famous English, she said the picture, it shouldn't actually be the scribbly line. It should be more like this. And this is from Thanksgiving Square in Dallas. Some of y'all be familiar with. She said the life of faith is like a spiral where you can't really do hard on yourself, where you find yourself relearning something again, because there's something about the way you're learning at this time and this place that brings a nuance, brings a depth, brings change. And so we find ourselves tripping on the same things, but maybe learning a greater trust in God along the way. Being able to, like the prayer book tells us in the back, thanking God even for those disappointments, which lead us to acknowledge our dependence on God alone. So the life of faith is like a spiral. And so if some days you feel dizzy, you're in good company. It's one of the oldest images for the trajectory of the life we share. And toward what end, Paul in Ephesians would say, growing into the full stature of Christ. So I want to share a story. We're going to come back to this in a second. Where did my story go? I think oh gosh. Disappeared. Here, we're going to find it. Oh my goodness. All right. So one of my slides disappeared. It was the story, I'll put it to you next week because it's delightful and it's short. But it's a story you probably already know of Peter. Peter is like if you were going to take a case study out of this theory, the life of faith is for daily walking, and it's in the dailiness that you grow, and it's in the dailiness that God shows up and surprises you. It has to be Peter, right? Because he changes hugely significantly. Plus, he's the only disciple foolish enough to do all his stuff in public so that we can criticize him, scrutinize him, whatever, all these years later. So who remembers a favorite Peter moment? Favorite St. Peter moment?